A few hours later, almost at midnight, Simi woke up to the sight of a black cat in her room. She was so terrified as she could not believe how the cat gained access to her room, and before she knew what was happening, the cat disappeared and Simi screamed at the top of her voice in fear. Once upon a time, a girl named Simi moved into a very small village and was in search of a room to rent. All the places she visited had no empty rooms left, and Simi was so frustrated because it was already getting dark. She walked on the streets, knocking from door to door to see if anyone would be kind enough to rent out a room. But Simi was not in luck as no one had an empty room to rent to her. Simi sat in a corner as she wept. She was extremely exhausted and wondered where she would lay her head, considering the fact that it was already getting dark. Not so long afterwards, a young man caught sight of Simi sitting all alone in the corner. He approached her to ask why she looked so worried, and Simi explained to the young man that she was new in the village and had no luck finding a room to rent. The young man then told her that he had a place for her, but that the place comes with the condition that she would not move out of the house until after 2 years, and Simi, without hesitation, agreed to rent the room as she was so desperate to find a place to live. Simi heaved a sigh of relief as she could not believe that she had finally found a place to rent. They walked for a few minutes and arrived at an old house, which was stationed in a very lonely corner. Simi felt a shiver run down her spine when they approached the house, but since it was already getting dark, she was left with no other option but to view the room as she had no intention of sleeping on the street. They walked into the house and met an old woman who the young man introduced to Simi as Mama Bumi. Mama Bumi was not a woman of so many words. She barely spoke with Simi as she left the young man to do all the talking. The young man showed Simi the room and Simi was so excited because the room looked so spacious and nice. After a few minutes, the young man reminded Simi that she was bound to stay in the room for 2 years before ever leaving, and Simi, without hesitation, agreed, and the young man handed her the key to the room as he left her alone to settle in. Simi was so exhausted and had no strength to unpack her clothes. She fell into her bed and didn't know when she drifted into a very deep sleep. By morning, Simi woke up extremely exhausted despite sleeping all night long. She decided to rush off to work as it was her very first day at the factory. As Simi was leaving the house, she bumped into Mama Bumi, who asked if she had a restful sleep. Simi smiled at Mama Bumi and replied that her night was restful, and Mama Bumi smiled at her as she rushed off to work. My landlady seems caring, Simi said to herself as she hastened her steps so as not to arrive the factory late. After an extremely long day, Simi returned home tired and hungry. She had nothing to eat all day, so she decided to stroll to the nearby market to buy some food when she came across a young woman who told her to leave her house as soon as possible. The woman seemed terrified of something, and before Simi could ask her why she said what she said, the woman ran away as fast as her legs could carry her. Simi, shocked at what had just happened, bought her food from the market and returned home to eat. Her landlady seemed not to be home, so Simi finished up her food and went straight to bed. Simi was so happy to finally be home as her day at the factory was extremely stressful. Her joints and body ached like someone who was seriously battered, so Simi closed her eyes to catch some sleep. A few hours later, almost at midnight, Simi woke up to the sight of a black cat in her room. She was so terrified as she could not believe how the cat gained access to her room, and before she knew what was happening, the cat disappeared, and Simi screamed at the top of her voice in fear. She sat on her bed, shaking in fear, as she reflected on what had just happened. Still filled with terror, Simi stayed up all night, unable to fall back to sleep. By morning, Simi felt so miserable as she barely got enough sleep at night. She struggled through her day at work as she dreaded ever returning to her room. She left work and headed straight to the market close to her house to eat some food. While she was there, she saw the young man who gave her the room. Simi explained her ordeal to him, but the young man told her that everything was most likely a fabrication of her own imagination. Simi tried to tell the young man what she saw, but the young man did not seem so interested in what she had to say. After a few hours, Simi returned home still shaking in fear from all that happened the previous night. She laid her head down to sleep, but could not take her mind off the black cat. Simi remembered the song her late mother taught her to sing whenever she was afraid, and sang herself to sleep. Late that night, Simi found herself being buried in the forest. She tried to run away, but her legs and body seemed so stiff. Simi tried to scream, but her whole body seemed not to move, as though she was paralyzed. She watched as the sand hit her body and leg, as the unknown person tried to bury her alive. Suddenly, she woke up and realized that it was a dream. Simi sat on her bed confused, as the dream seemed too real to be a dream. Terrified at all that had been happening, Simi remembered the woman in the market who warned her to leave the house. She had no idea who the woman was or where she lived, so Simi decided to look for the woman to ask her why she warned her to leave the house. When morning came, Simi smelled a foul smell in the house and wondered where it was coming from. She walked from room to room but could not find where the horrible smell was coming from, so she left the house in a hurry as she headed straight for work. When she arrived at the factory, Simi noticed that everyone was talking about her. This seemed odd and confusing, and Simi wondered why this was happening. Little did she know that the smell was coming from her. Simi lost her job at the factory because of the horrible smell that was oozing from her body. As she walked on the streets, people avoided her, and Simi could not figure out why she was smelling. She returned home and took a very long shower, hoping to wash away the smell, but nothing she did worked, as she was unable to eradicate the extremely foul smell emanating from her body. Simi curled up in her bed, unable to sleep as she wept. It was almost midnight, and Simi dreaded what would happen to her if she fell asleep in her room. In that moment, she remembered the young woman in the market and made up her mind to go in search of her the next morning. When morning came, Simi set out to find the young woman. She walked from one corner of the village to the other, hoping to find the woman, but the woman was nowhere in sight. Simi sat next to a local shop as she wept, and the smell emanating from her body chased everyone away. The shop owner, on perceiving the horrible smell, came out to investigate where the foul smell was coming from when she caught sight of Simi weeping in the corner. Simi's eyes locked with that of the shop owner, who she recognized immediately. "I have been looking for you," Simi said as her voice shook in pain. She pleaded with the woman to reveal the reason why she advised her to leave the house, and the woman looked at her with pity as she told her something that Simi never saw coming. The woman, whose name was Yinka, told Simi that her landlady was a witch. She went on to tell Simi that everyone who has ever lived in Mama Bumi's house as a tenant died a few months after moving into the house. Simi opened her mouth shocked as she went on to ask Yinka how she knew about all this, and Yinka told her that she was the only tenant who survived Mama Bumi's witchcraft. Yinka warned Simi that if she did not leave the house as soon as possible, she would die like the others. Simi was extremely terrified as she asked Yinka what she could do to save her life and rid herself of the horrible smell that tormented her, and Yinka whispered some words into Simi's ears, encouraging her to return back to Mama Bumi's house. Simi returned home afraid. She sat on her bed as she pondered on what Yinka told her. Goosebumps filled her entire body as she summoned the courage to follow through with the plan. Once it was midnight, Mama Bumi left her human body as her spirit transformed into an evil black cat and appeared in Simi's room. What Mama Bumi did not know was that Simi was not asleep. Immediately Simi caught sight of the black cat. She sprinkled a substance Yinka gave to her on the cat, and the cat froze and could not move. Simi then rushed to her landlady's room and moved her body from the position it was to an entirely different position. Immediately Simi did this, she heard a loud scream from her room. By the time she returned to her room, the black cat was no longer in the room. Simi in that moment realized that she was no longer plagued by the horrible smell that had tormented her for weeks, and by morning, she realized that her landlady was dead. What had happened was that immediately Simi moved her landlady's body, she ruined her every chance of re-entering her body. So, when her landlady's spirit tried to re-enter the body, she couldn't because her body had already been moved. This was the only way that Simi could free herself from her evil landlady, who was hell-bent on killing her. The news of Mama Bumi's strange death spread around the village, and her body was buried in the forest because of the evil she committed in her lifetime. Simi moved her things out of the house and decided to return back to her family in a faraway village. Before she left, she stopped by Yinka's shop to thank her for saving her life. Simi was extremely grateful to return back to her family alive, despite all that she went through in Mama Bumi's hands. The lesson to be learned from this story is that evil has an expiry date. Whenever you are faced with challenges or long-standing difficulties, always remember that whatever has a beginning has an end. I hope you enjoyed the story.
Like, subscribe and leave a comment. It helps us grow our channel. I'll see you in our next story. Bye.